City of Stevens Point Special Finance Committee meeting, recorded December 12, 2022.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm ready to go, so thanks for your patience. I apologize, didn't realize it was going to get done this early. But
No one did.
Yeah, we were testing you, Corey, just to see if you're paying attention. You were not, so.
okay.
But thanks for joining us, and thanks for everyone's patience. Good evening, everyone. It is the 12th of December, and I hope everybody has their flashlights in order for the snowstorm that's coming up. So, and shovels. This is the Finance Committee meeting, and I will call it to order. It is 6:05 p.m., and I will ask that a roll call be taken. And I don't know who's doing that.
I can do it.
Okay.
Okay.
So it looks
Carrie's here now, so we're good, Corey.
Okay.
Johnson,
I'm here.
Morrow,
Here.
Dalton, here, Plassance.
Here.
And then we have Shore on.
Sure. Oh, you're there. Okay.
Everybody's confused tonight. I'm glad it's just not me.
Seriously, I'm here as long as my hotspot holds up. If I do lose the connection, I will dial in just from the phone directly.
Okay. Thank you, David.
All right.
Alrighty, moving on. Item 2, or Section 2, discussion and possible action on approval. Item 2 is approval of transfer between funds. There was a memo, and this is related to Gerke, and
I'll make a motion to approve the outline transfer.
all right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
And we have a second. Comptroller Treasurer, do you have anything to add for the information of the audience so they are aware of what we're doing? Oh, you are.
Often at the December meeting to just formalize some of the transfers that we've talked about through the year, which would be the case with the transfer related to Gerke. And then the other transfer is a transfer of funds from TIF 5 to TIF 6.
Okay.
TIF 5 has been in the position where it's been able to support TIF 6. So transferring an additional $400,000 from that north side TIF 5 to TIF 6, which is the downtown TIF, that will help us improve our fund balance a little bit and also cover some of the fund balance that was used for the Gerke project.
All right, thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? Back to David, he's shaking his head. Anyone from the audience who wishes to come to the lectern? Very well. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion as presented to approve the transfer of the funds, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carries. Item 2, consideration of options for addressing, it's item 3, sorry. Item 3 under Section 2, consideration of options for addressing challenges in the 2024 operating budget. My preference is this is more of a discussion item because it is really a discussion item. So, in my opinion. So I would look to, I don't think we're ready to advance any motion on this because of the broad discussion that we should be having on this. And I would be looking to the Comptroller Treasurer to kind of run through his memo. Thank you for doing that. I know that our department directors are here as well. So Corey, I'm looking to you for some edification on this complex topic.
It goes back to the conversation that we started at the October Finance Committee meeting when we were talking about the budget and talked about that 2024 might be a more difficult budget year. So we're certainly having this conversation far in advance of obviously when the 2024 budget process takes place. One of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation now is because one of the options would be to do a referendum to exceed levy limits. And if that's an option that we wish to pursue, and I don't know if it is or not, but if it is, then that is something that we actually need to decide by January, which is next month. So if we don't pass a resolution to go to a referendum by next month, then basically that window or that potential solution does close for us. So that's one of the big reasons why we're having this conversation now. I would say we have to decide either we're going to go to a levy limit referendum or we're going to pursue other solutions. We don't necessarily have to decide what those other solutions are going to be right now, but it's just if we're going to let that window close on being able to do a referendum, then we have to be ready to say, okay, we're going to do something, whether that's a transportation utility, whether that's a wheel tax, which would be a fee on the vehicle registration for vehicles that are located within the city. But that's the big, I guess, thing that we need to decide is really whether or not we want to go to a referendum. And then if we don't, I think it is good to maybe start that conversation a little bit to say, what are we going to do with some of the other options, either a transportation utility or another fee of some kind. As I noted in my memo, I think the transportation utility is a very good option. Charging properties according to the number of trips that they generate, but there are a few legal issues that we're also hoping will get cleaned up here as well. Hopefully, before the 2024 budget process takes place. So with that, I'm very interested to hear, the feedback that the committee has and any initial thoughts or questions.
All right, thank you. The one clarification, we could potentially hold a special election just for referendum in either August or November. Is that not correct?
I would have to defer to the city clerk on that. I believe that could be a potential,
Yes.
But I would...
She is nodding in the affirmative. It's just that there would be an extra
Okay.
cost associated.
Cost, because we wouldn't have an election.
Okay.
So it would
Yeah.
be totally
Okay,
city.
I just wanted to make that clear that that's out there. All right, thank you, both of you, appreciate that. Start the discussion, thoughts? Go
I
ahead.
can start. Well, obviously no one likes to entertain an increase to the tax levy. I'm supportive of a referendum. I think that the political climate in our community is such that the people's voices would like to be heard, and a referendum is an effective way of doing that. And I appreciate the transportation utility as kind of a backup plan or something that maybe we even need in the future down the line. But of course, that will remain to be seen. And I think my perspective is generally fees and other things that we start to tack on don't always get at the people who are fully utilizing the services. Wheel taxes only go to residential drivers and not commercial, and I'm sure Director Badoon can articulate the difference disproportionately that a commercial vehicle puts on our roads versus a minivan or a sedan. And those just tend to be, as Director Laddick outlined, regressive, so affecting people who have the least the most. I don't have a problem putting a referendum on, and we'll see what people say.
I would echo what Polly said too. I think a wheels tax would not really generate that much money anyway, and the county already has a wheels tax as well. So we'd be in essence double taxing folks for the same thing, really. And I don't think that would really go over very well. I don't think it'd really generate that much money. The transportation utility, I mean, there's still a lot of questions about that as well. I mean, every community now is trying to look for more money. I know that I saw on one of the Sunday talk shows that Voss is open to trying to renegotiate what the shared revenue is going to end up being, but who knows what that's going to be or when that will ever be. But I know our shared revenue keeps going down each year. And that hasn't been helpful for us. And so municipalities like us are also trying to struggle to keep the potholes fixed, trying to keep the roads, trying to keep the roads plowed, and so on, to keep our quality of life here. And with taxes going up, like everything else, that's no one ever wants to end up seeing that. But I think for fees, that's the only other way that I think that we can do that. I know we've talked about some other things as well with EMS at times to see if that could be pushed through, because there's no limit on that. But I think a referendum would also be good too, to see what the folks of Stevens Point would really want, and see what other options that we have.
I'm now going to our newest member, Mr.
Thank you.
Plassance.
Being the newest member, not knowing a lot about certain things and just trying to get caught up to speed on things, this transportation utility, I do have one question right off the bat, is that what is a trip?
Director Badoon? That's a good question. Yeah.
That is actually a very good question. And as it's otherwise defined in the industry, it's really just like, as much as it sounds like, it's going from your house to the grocery store. Just one trip. The second trip is actually returning to that.
From my house to where?
To like a grocery store,
Oh, okay.
wherever you're headed to.
Okay.
Wherever your destination is a trip.
Yes.
So it's wherever you start from to wherever you're going to is a trip, and then returning is a second trip.
And how is that monitored? If they're talking about increasing number of trips?
Well, the industry has kind of been going at the Institute of Traffic Engineers, ITE, has been monitoring this sort of thing for a long time to do traffic analysis. And so they have identified data for, a variety of things, simply by monitoring, who comes here. It's survey data, it's monitoring data, talking to people when they, say, arrive at a bank. Where did you come from? Where are you headed to next? So they actually identify that even specifically from trips that identify, say, from home to a destination home, as far as just otherwise passed by trips. Coffee shops oftentimes don't generate their own business. It's people that are traveling, say, from home to work that just stop by. That trip would still happen if the coffee shop wasn't otherwise there. It's just a matter that since it's on the way, they're going to stop in and do that. So all of that stuff has kind of been sorted out, and kind of looked at from a variety of different angles to identify what that is and how it's determined. And there's, honestly, if you look at the book, Trip Generation book, it's not a thin book. It's very, very thick to identify all this, to go through the methodology of how those trips have been determined and why what separates different kind of businesses that may be, similar in itself. i.e. like a gas station versus a gas station with a convenience store versus a gas station with a convenience store and a car wash, and kind of split those things down. They even look at it so far, like in today, one of the things that kind of comes out, we don't otherwise have one here. It sounds like we might be getting one in the area. As soon as a Chick-fil-A does not follow the typical fast food approach. If you've ever been to one, it's always backed up. And so they actually are developing a separate trip generator specifically for Chick-fil-A, as well as modifying a number of others for fast food restaurants based on COVID and the response thereafter, with fewer people dining in, more people using the drive-through. It's changing. But that's where it's at. And it comes from a long history of kind of watching and monitoring and asking the questions and getting there. And so it's really just kind of, I don't know in the first one, I think they're on the 11th edition. So this has been along, and modified and improved over the years. But your sort of answer, a trip, wherever I start to wherever I end.
Okay.
My destination is a trip.
All right, thank you.
Answer your question. If you want to stay there, I saw that Alder Shore has a question as well. Anything else?
Yes. In looking at other items that are coming up on our agenda for tonight, I see that there is going to be talk about a Hilton. And in looking at the financial paperwork, as far as one of the deficits for 2024 was because of the lower amount of startup construction. Has this property or this potential build been factored into the budget?
That would be a Corey question. Did you hear that, Corey?
I did, yep. I heard the question, and basically for net new construction, it's about a 2-year delay. So when we're talking about the 2024 budget, we're actually looking at what was constructed during 2022. So that's really how we identified that we might have an issue here, is looking at everything that was constructed for 2022 and sort of adding it up. We need about $50 to $60 million in new construction every year just to allow us to have an increase in our operating levy of about 2.5%. So the Hilton will help, and when we have developments like that, they definitely help. It's just that the Hilton will help for a future year, not for the 2024 budget. If it's constructed in 2023, then it would affect the 2025 budget.
Okay, thank you.
And did you have your great questions?
I think I'm done with questions. Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, please let me know if you have
Oh,
more.
I do have one more question, yeah. I know, like, on a beach, it's made up of a lot of grains of sand. And sometimes when creating a budget and stuff, you have to pull from a lot of different angles and stuff. E-bikes are starting to become a big thing. Is there any talk as far as licensing those?
That might be a law enforcement question. I haven't
Or
heard
just
anything.
something for future thought
Yeah,
at this point?
yeah. I haven't heard anything. I have wondered about it, though, so it's, yeah, good
The
question.
motor on the road.
I was almost run over by one. But anyway, that's because I wasn't paying attention. Alder Shore, I know you had your hand up.
Thank you. We're in the land of no great options, which we spend a lot of time in, unfortunately. One question for Director Badun and one question for Comptroller Treasurer Laddick, both having to do with making our revenues as progressively taxed and feed as possible. But one more side note, what I assume that you and your colleagues are all doing and is helpful is looking at that, that issue of what comes into capital and what comes into operating. And I know that some really good creativity and sharp pencils help with some of these issues there. So my question to Director Badun, I'm sure this has been explained before, but I'd like to hear again why we can't, for a transportation utility, capture more of the commercial use. If we think about wear and tear, it is the Festival Foods, the Kroger, Metro Market, the Lineage. I don't know. I mean, you get where I'm coming from, and maybe there's no good answer, and we're just going to continue to be frustrated. But we should hear again, please.
Did you get the gist of the question?
I'm not sure I quite do. Are we talking about commercial vehicles?
I
Is that
think,
the question?
yeah, if I'm correct, maybe.
Yep, and some of the businesses most closely, identifiably associated with heavy commercial use.
Sure. I have to admit, I probably don't have the best answer for that, simply because when we try to balance out economics, especially regionally, statewide, and whatnot, it's often kind of just considered that the benefits of having those larger commercial vehicles on is the sign of economic development and prosperity. So we try not to impose too much upon them to get there. But yes, understanding that they do take a larger toll on the roadways. And so there's some of the reasons why they have checks and balances and weigh stations along the highways, which are hardly ever open, though. I don't understand how that works, but that's another topic. But yes, because I don't know exactly how we would get there, because that becomes more of a vehicle registration sort of question than a regulatory on our part. We could impose weight limits within our streets to try to offset that. How that would exactly look, I don't know, and how it would ever be enforced, I don't understand. But understanding that they do to give an idea of what it is, and I always forget the magnitude of what it is. But in the industry, they identify something is called an easel. It's an equivalent single axle load. So we're trying to think about there. So one easel is basically equal to your automatic passenger vehicle. When you get into some of these box trucks, they represent about 1,500 easels. And when you get into full tractor trailers, we're looking at even magnitudes beyond that. So when trying to figure out what that is and what that really means in a more technical term is, especially thinking asphalt itself is a flexible pavement. So trying to think of one axle passing and the flexure that comes in there, that repetitive nature that eventually cracks the asphalt. That's one of the major contributors to asphalt failure. Now think of this large load and think of how much more that's flexing. So that one truck passing through is like having 1,500 passenger cars travel. So there is definitely a correlation there, but I don't know exactly how we would capture.
I mean, my intention was not to exclude, limit a certain weight within the city limits. That was not my intention. But my intention was, I thank you for the explanation, but the, cost of having economic vitality idea, philosophy or whatever, isn't resonating a lot with me, because I don't know, it's in the nature of progressive taxation to try and the reason we use resort to fees so much is to associate use wear and tear, with those costs and getting them covered. But we can leave that for the moment, and let me now ask my question to the Comptroller Treasurer.
If I could, just one more thing.
Please.
Alder, I apologize for now, but I guess just the one thing to point out, just, trying to bring this to closure, from my perspective, but that is one of the reasons too why we have designated truck routes, is to try to keep vehicles off of some of the local roads and stuff, so we don't have the deterioration. So just so someone's not worried about our roads falling apart, I guess I wanted to just close that loop. We do have designated truck routes to keep those there to prevent that sort of additional wear and tear on the majority of our streets.
To confine, thank you for that. That gives the full picture, right? With the idea being to confine that heavy wear and tear onto certain arteries. I get the point. What I wanted to ask the Comptroller Treasurer about is revaluation, and what the effect of that will be. We know that. Before the last revaluation, a lot of time had passed, and we wanted to get better at doing it a little more regularly. So what I wanted to ask is, I guess the way levy limits work is that when you revalue, you can't breach the levy limits, and so you don't get the full benefit, of increased values. And so all that happens is within the limit, it's redistributed so that those properties that have gone up more pay more. Okay, so I'm understanding that correct. Well, so then if you could say a little bit more then about when the increased value is then captured by reassessing, what that will mean in terms of taxes going up in true proportion to the full value of the property. Understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think to an extent. So with the revaluation that's occurring right now, we expect that the new values would be effective for the tax bill that goes out December of 2023, so about a year from now. And you're exactly correct that levy limits don't apply to the actual tax rate. They apply to the total amount that we're collecting for operations. So when you have a revaluation, basically what happens is there's no adjustment to that levy limit. So there's not really, a lot of people think that there's like this benefit to the city that we're doing a revaluation so we can collect more money. And that's not really true, because we actually can't collect any more money with the revaluation than what we otherwise could. Like you said, it really just ends up being a redistribution sometimes of the tax burden between properties that went up more than average and properties that went up less than average.
David, we cannot hear you, David.
Unmuting.
Okay,
Thanks for all that. To finish the thought, and I think this is important for that full picture, the increase of the levy limit, if we're talking about having the true picture of what properties are worth, yes, that's a tax increase in the sense that the amount of the tax will go up. But in terms of the percentage, not necessarily, right? Because, it's sort of like, okay, I'm glad, thank you for clarifying, right, that it's sort of like there's a discount on that full value, on the current value of the property, that without a new higher levy limit. Okay, great. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because especially how properties have been appreciating. If our, I guess, tax rate followed that, we wouldn't, even be in this position of talking about, do we need to go to a referendum, or do we need to do this, or do we need to do that? Because values have increased substantially. And, even when we're talking about the potential of going to a referendum to ask, okay, couldn't we do, a 2.5% increase? Certainly over the last couple of years, values have been going up by much more than 2.5%. So, we're still trying to obviously keep things pretty reasonable. I think the other thing to note kind of to that point is a lot of the other taxes that we pay more automatically. So for instance, sales tax, income tax, with inflation, we're automatically paying more without really calling it a tax increase. With us relying on property taxes, unfortunately, we're kind of in this position where even an inflationary adjustment like that, is seen as a tax increase, whereas, every year we are likely, paying more in sales tax, paying more in income tax just with inflation. We never really look at that as a tax increase, but for property taxes, we tend to look at that as an increase.
Thank you. I'll go back this way and then go that way. Did you have anything else? I thought I saw you had raised your hand at one point.
One thing I was going to say, the transportation utility, there's so many unknowns to that, and it seems like it's just not really a feasible thing at this time to even, because like what is a trip? How do you actually gauge that? How do you actually measure that? There's just so many other things to look at there, and how would you enforce that? If someone says, well, I only drove back and forth to church, that's all they ever do.
I think what the director was saying is that they have a book of averages that are used across the United States for these kind of things. In other words, we don't have Director Badoon standing outside your house seeing how many trips you make.
Right, but there seems to be a lot more room for folks to really kind of complain about, well, I don't do that. I don't think anybody wants to put a toll road outside on Highway 10 or anything. So, I think in theory, until some other things get worked out, I don't think that's really a viable option at this point.
Yeah, thank you for that. Back to
Getting back to the increase in property values, I just have a question regarding that. So I would get a tax bill when reassessed and the value goes up, I pay extra. Where does that money go then if the city cannot take and use all of that? It's to the treasurer.
Sure. So it depends on how much your value goes up in terms of if your taxes go up or not. With the last revaluation, one of the things that we had happen is we had some people stay about the same, we had some people go up, and we had some people go down. And a lot of what's happening there, and this can be a hard pill to swallow, but basically you're rebalancing the property tax burden to an extent. So for the people who went up dramatically, basically it is a redistribution where they're now grabbing a larger share of the tax burden, and then there are some other properties that might actually go down in terms of their share of the tax burden, just based on how your property value has appreciated versus the other properties in the city.
Does that help?
It does to a certain point. I just don't see anything going down after the last few years and how home sale prices and everything.
I think it
That's
kind of,
skyrocketed.
imagine, we have a lot of people who have been improving their homes while others haven't. So there's that back and forth. Yes, sir.
It might help too if Corey talks about anticipated mill rate, right? So you have a mill rate right now of about $11 per thousand. After the revaluation, you may see a mill rate of $9 per thousand. So the value goes up, but the tax bill doesn't necessarily go up for you.
We're not getting richer. So
Thank you.
I'll call on members of the audience in just a moment. Thank you, I appreciate that. I know we have, our directors are all lining up there, so I think they have something to say. My question is probably to the last director, since he actually is a director for utilities that we assess fees for. Could you help us understand all of those that we do and how that is distributed out? So.
Oh, for the other utilities?
Yeah, because we're already doing it. We already have utilities.
So the longest standing, of course, sewer and water. Those have been going on while we're celebrating our 100th year as a public water supply utility this year. Sewer shortly behind that. Stormwater utility came into being in 2013. And under the enterprises, we also have a fiber optic utility. It's a very small one. It's not for public use. It's for kind of the K-12, higher ed, nonprofit, hospital, university type use. So we have that too.
Yeah. And you were able to assess out proportionally the fees?
Yeah. So essentially, I mean, the whole basis behind a utility structure is fee for service, right? So you try to parse out in the best way possible how to cover your expenses to the appropriate parties. The most recent one and the one most similar to a potential transportation utility would be the stormwater utility, where each single-family residence in this case, and it would work slightly different, everybody pays the same based on an average. So what we did there is took 100 single-family residences, measured the square foot impervious area, averaged them, and everybody pays that for single-family. Anybody not single-family, duplexes and triplexes are 0.8 of that, 80% of that for each unit. And then commercial, industrial, and public authority, we measure it all out. So you pay based on actual impervious area. The transportation utility would be very similar in that while there's some decision making to go on, it'd be based on like a dwelling unit, right? So maybe 8-plex, that place would be 8 dwelling units, and a single family would be 1 dwelling unit. Whereas something like Scott was saying before, a convenience store or gas station has a lookup table, and that's based on other things too. So a real easy one would be something like an office building. You'd have so many trips per 1,000 square feet. So for every 1,000 square feet of that office building, say it's 13 trips or something, you do the math and it's real easy. So that's the biggest part, the biggest thing that's unknown right now for the transportation utility. And I don't want to steal your thunder here, but it's how many trips are out there. That's the one number that we need to get to then divide that into the budget, right? So that's all that's unknown, really, is how many are out there total, because we don't have a handle on every single business and how they would be found in that lookup chart just yet.
Director Badun, I know you're chomping at the bit. Yeah. I could see it in your face.
Well, I was, but really not anymore, because actually Director Lemke
Okay.
really responded
He
to what I
stole your
was,
thunder.
which was,
Yeah.
yes, he did. I'm very disappointed. It's just that, because that's all I really wanted to comment on, is that, using the ITE, methodology to get there, it says all the individual trips are already determined. What we just need to do is sum up the total number of trips that the city has and then disperse that across there equitably across all those trips to determine what each, I forget exactly how the breakdown of it is in the manual, but just trying to figure out a residential equivalent, very, very similar to the stormwater. And then once we have that, then it's just a matter of applying those to all the other non-residential properties proportional to that, based upon the total number of trips estimated that they generate. And then there's your fee.
I think the one thing we haven't discussed is this cannot be used in any way the city wishes if this was an option. There's very, very narrow scope. Is that my understanding?
It's limited, yes. To say specifically, narrow, I guess it depends on your definition of what narrow is. Essentially, yes, we could spend it, on most things to say within the right of way. And how we otherwise get there, because even, unlike in Comptroller Treasurer, I'm sure will correct me, under our operating budget, say if we were to do sidewalk repairs and stuff, sidewalks are not an eligible cost under that for transportation aids. However, we could actually include those in a transportation utility to identify that. That would probably take a little more discussion to figure how that is, because that's not directly related to the number of trips that there was made, but there's another methodology we could utilize to do that. The only two things that we cannot do that we know of are snow plowing and sweeping. But everything else within the right-of-way is pretty much fair game. But yes, it is limited that we can't, build a new city hall. We can't, as much as I'm sure Director Kramer would love that, we can't buy another park or put in playground equipment or anything of that nature, no.
Thank you. Oh, and come on back, Joel.
I just want to throw one more thing out there in a conversation just before the meeting, talking about this a little bit, and I don't think it's come up yet, at least in public conversation, is that Stevens Point is a net importer of people during the day. And the businesses and the infrastructure we have in town need to support that. And the equitable distribution of fees through a transportation utility actually accounts for that a bit. Because if we have a population in the 27,000 range, there was a study we did about a dozen years ago now when we were looking at the intercity bus stuff that said that we support 50,000 during the day. So certainly our businesses are supporting them too. So the trips associated with those businesses, because they can thrive here, right? And that partially is dependent on importing people,
Sure.
is somehow maybe a good distribution of fees through that mechanism.
Okay.
Just
Yeah,
food for
no,
thought. Yeah.
good information. Ryan, Director Konowski, did you have something? I want to give equal access before I look to members of the audience.
Just a few things to clarify. There is not a Chick-fil-A coming to the city of Stevens Point.
You don't
throwing
know
that one out there. But I know Alder Plaisance was asking questions about the revaluation, and because community development does oversee tax assessment, I was just ready to answer any questions that might come up. Corey did an excellent job. So
Yes, you did. All right, thank you. All right, it looks like the committee has asked their questions. Staff has provided great information. I'm going to go to members of the audience, and that gentleman did have his hand up first, so I'd ask you to come up to the lectern, please. And when you come up, if you would just give your name and if you live in the city of Stevens Point or somewhere else.
My first meeting, so I apologize for
No, take
my
your
effort
time.
there. Bill Bushman, I do live in the city of Stevens Point, Elmwood
you.
Avenue. And a couple of questions. One was going back to this trip. I think that's a very confusing concept.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if they were referring to that every residential single-family unit would get the same trip charge or cost.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding, but I can have one of the directors answer it. I'd rather have the expert answer it.
Scott's in the hall fielding another question, but there's a couple different approaches that can be taken in any fee-driven utility model. I think it's one that's been discussed to say, when you average those all out, as it relates to transportation, a single dwelling unit can represent a high or a low in that average, right? It doesn't matter if you're in a 3,500 square foot home, there might be 2 people there. If you're in a 2-bedroom apartment, there might be 4 people there. So the averages actually end up working out. Ultimately, that's an ordinance decision that the governing body needs to make on how to adopt it. But that's likely one of the proposals.
Does that answer your question, sir?
Well, it's a start, and I
Okay.
know this is just the start of that type of discussion, so I'm sure there'll be more to come.
Absolutely.
Secondly, on the appraisal reevaluation issue, certainly didn't want to hear that discussion, but in what's happening out there today, everything that I read, and I think this is true, home values they have gone up since 2019, I will say that.
Yeah.
But I believe this past 6 months, certainly over the next 12 months, I think you're going to see a decline in home values. So that raises the question, how are you going to come up with an acceptable valuation?
We'll
And
have
then
Director
on-
Karnowski come back.
Yes, and then on
Right
top.
here. Yep.
Okay. I was asking, how are you going to come up with an acceptable valuation in light of the decreasing values going forward to 2023? And then secondly, if one wants to dispute your assigned value, I think it's a typical appraisal practice that you have sales within the last 12 months. It's going to be very hard to find sales within the last 12 months. So really the residential homeowner is at a disadvantage in terms of dispute. And I'm not so sure how you come up with a value across the board in that situation.
Yeah, so
And I just want to clarify that this is a little bit off topic, but a little bit related, so I'll allow the answer to this, and we will have more discussions on that topic, so.
Sure. Both very good questions. First off, when we go through the revaluation process, we look at specific neighborhoods, and we're not oblivious to the fact that the home prices were far above and beyond. Even some of our assessors couldn't get to some of the sale prices in terms of the assessed value. And so we're being cognizant that there is a correction happening. We didn't really start diving into the actual revaluation process until about a month and a half ago. And so residents should start getting letters from the assessor's office asking for assessment inspections. But because there's been a correction in the housing market and the assessing staff being cognizant that the peak of the housing market is behind us, I would not expect that the fair market value or the sale value of the home is going to be what your assessed value is. I think you'll see something much more conservative that is going to last for a longer time. As it relates to challenging your assessment, every June we have what's called a board of review, and that's where you can challenge your assessment, and it's always good to have as much information as you can get. We have a citizen-appointed committee that will review your case case-by-case basis. Most of the time, if you do challenge an assessment, it's advised that you call the assessor, talk over your concerns with the assessor, and typically they will try to find some resolution before it goes to the Board of Appeals.
How does the city
Sir,
determine?
I'm just trying to tighten, I'm trying to tighten the
That's fine.
conversation.
I can take that up with this gentleman.
Absolutely.
And Mike, in answer to your one comment, I think the last time, not only did the values go up, so did the levy, if I'm not mistaken. And so I
Believe
think
it's
we
'cause
were
we
all
had
led
an
to believe
increase.
that, but that's not what
Yeah.
happened. So that's my comment. I don't know if it's true or not. I think it is.
Thank you.
It is, but it was like 15 years since the last one.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. Good questions, though. Thank you. And this is your first time, and I hope we see you back. Oh, yes, we do. Absolutely. I like anyone who asks good questions, so. Other members of the audience with questions? Mr. Christensen.
Mark Christensen, District 1, Alder. Just a comment, I know we do have a challenging budget coming up this coming year and the year after. I do think, I've heard concerns, and I was reading the reports that were sent out too. I do think that we do need to consider a transportation utility only as far as it spreads the impact among the largest number and largest portion of the community of any of the possible solutions. Schools, nonprofits, I mean, everybody would get impacted, just like with the stormwater utility. They pay their portion of that as well, and a transportation utility would as well, so it would lessen the impact on any individual compared to almost any other alternative.
Any other members of the audience?
I like making a comment there. Live feed is stuck on Scott Badoon still being up here.
Oh, well, isn't that interesting?
Good catch.
Scott is memorialized forever. There we go. All right.
Reset.
So I'm wondering if we want to, as a request back to staff to, I'm a visual kind of person. I would love to see these in comparison and numbers, what these look like between, I'll get to you in a minute. That's a weird sound. Sorry. Oh, that was, it's like, where's that coming from? I think I'd like to see a side-by-side comparison of what, a referendum to increase the levy versus a transportation utility and the impact. I mean, we have a little bit of information, but these are kind of complex. I would love to see at least a trip generation, what that would look like, what the potential for income would be, because right now we don't know. And some of the challenges associated with a referendum. I'm not opposed to referendums, obviously. I advanced 2 of them when I was on county board. Both of them successful. But, so I think we need more information unless someone disagrees with me. Nobody disagrees with me for once, that's nice. Go ahead, please.
First of all, Bill, thanks for coming, and probably nobody else knows this, but Bill and I worked together. You were in the mortgage field for, about 30 years? So it's valuable insight in regards to that. I wanted to talk a little bit about something that we haven't touched on yet, considering those options for the operational budget. Alderperson Christensen brought it up. A utility covers everyone. All of the buildings, the nonprofits, the schools, the university, any of the users of that utility pay their share based on an average, and you may or may not agree with what trips are. But like Dave said, it's grains of sand on a beach. These are a few of the options. Some of the other options that we've been working on pretty diligently are working with legislators to get back from the state some of the money that we already pay. It's not always about just give me more money because I got to pay my bills or I have to plow the roads. It's about, boy, what happens to all this money that we give the state and our shared revenue keeps declining? Give us back the money that we already pay in, and we may not have the same budget challenges next year. The other option, of course, this one is a spending thing, but there's a movement statewide to ask that emergency services be excluded from the budget. We shouldn't have to decide between a firefighter or a plow truck driver. There are certain things that we really need to focus on and emphasize. So, as Dave said, grains of sand. There are a lot of solutions that we're working on right now. There are several, of course, that the council will have to decide on, and two of those, I guess, being the spending referendum, which I think it's a big ask.
It is
to ask people. Thank you for the commentary.
Yeah.
The ask of people to allow us to spend more of your money, I don't think is very prudent, but in some cases it's necessary. The transportation utility is an option, and it spreads that a little more equitably across the board, rather than going to that referendum and then your schools and churches and all of the other people who don't pay taxes really don't see any impact to that at all, so it doesn't really matter. So I just want people to know that we're working on a lot of solutions, not just one or two. And it's going to be challenging for every single community in the state until some of the things change at the state level. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I don't know if I misheard you. It's like in the county, emergency EMS is separate. It's still levied, but it's a separate levy.
Yep,
So-
and that's what I had said.
Yeah.
It's still spending more money.
Right, but it's a separate
But it's
levy,
a
so
separate
it-
levy, so it's outside that
Outside the
levy
levy,
limit, just
yeah.
like it is in the county. The county has that luxury.
Yeah.
The cities don't.
Yeah, so in the interest of fair play, that would seem to make sense. Yeah. All right. Have we exhausted conversation, and anyone is objecting to the request to have staff bring this back with a good, Ms. Kneebone.
Mary Kneebone, District 7 Alder. Actually, I like what you just said about having things that we can look at. I think it would also be incumbent on staff to say, if we don't get this, this is what might be cut. It costs X number of dollars to plow the streets. It costs X number of dollars to mow Iverson Park. These are the things, if we don't make up this shortfall, however we do it, these are the things that we're going to have, that we may lose. So something like that, to see what choices we have to make and let the public understand the choices that have to be made might help. So
Excellent. I love good ideas. These are all excellent ideas. Great discussion.
One more quick comment, if I could. I feel compelled to remind people, I know everybody knows this on council, but we've asked our staff for a 0% increase in their operational budget for the last 2 years. The cost of everything has gone up as much as 10% or more. And in addition to that, this year we went back because we were asked to sharpen the pencil to make sure the employees get at least a 3% raise, which is a pittance compared to the cost of living. So we actually had departments make cuts this year. Those things are important to note, that we're not just like, give me a blank check. We are making those cuts already.
Awesome. Great discussion. Thank you for all the good ideas and the questions and the comments. Look forward to seeing that. And I would add to my request for additional information and evaluation comparison, exactly what Alder Kneebone had requested. So it'll be good. I look forward to that. Thank you. I think it's called the devil's alternative. There's not a good one. We've got to figure this out. So. Alrighty. Item 4 under Section 2, approving the write-off of uncollectible personal property taxes. We do this, unfortunately, every year. I would entertain a motion.
Alder so moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
A second.
Second, Plaisance. Any discussion on the item? Again, this is routine, done every year. Sometimes the list is unfortunately long.
Not this year.
Yeah, thankfully, we've had a good economy. Any questions from the audience about those debts that we're writing off?
Is that a dollar amount?
Pardon me?
The dollar amount?
The dollar amount, $1,351.49. So for the audience who is listening at home, we had a question from the audience to articulate the sum. The sum is $1,351.49. So thank you for that. All right. Motion on the floor in a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carries. Item 5, consideration of request for funding for the Stevens Point Area Convention and Visitors Bureau. We saw the memo, and of course probably saw, I think there was a news piece on Channel 7 or Channel 9 recently that Plover has decided to exit the Stevens Point Area Convention and Visitor Bureau and do their own thing. This is a request to help ensure that the Stevens Point Area Convention and Visitors Bureau is able to keep their head above water until they can come up with a different plan. So I would entertain a motion.
Alder so moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And we have a second. Discussion? Yes.
So if Plover pulls away, all the motels, I just need to get a grasp of this. The motels that are in Plover, their percentage of what they would give to the Convention and Visitor Bureau as it was earlier this year is gone.
Yes.
And we have to make up that budget and figure out what exactly
Yeah.
we don't have to have because Plover's not in it anymore?
I think it's breathing room, basically, for now. I have every confidence in the Convention and Visitors Bureau and Sarah Brish and her team there to figure this out, but for now, this is breathing room.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Any other questions? All right, we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Oop, thank you, David. I always forget you're online. Motion carries. Item 6 is discussion and possible action on developers agreement for a Hilton Home 2 Suites located at 5511 John Jonas Drive. And Director Karnowski, I guess I would entertain a motion to bring it to the floor for discussion.
I'll move approval.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please, Director, for the audience and those listening at home.
Thank you. So as the council hopefully recalls, the last few months, city staff has been working on a possible development agreement with a Hilton Home 2 Suites located in the Portage County Business Park, just north of Nicolay Bank, which was formerly Investors Community Bank. As part of the development agreement, the city through the Tax Increment Finance District has agreed to an incentive of $500,000 upon 75% completion, $500,000 upon final occupancy, and then a 50% pay-go incentive, less the debt service on the total upfront incentive. That will equal about $316,000. So the total city incentive for this specific project would be about $1.3 million. The total net increase in property tax is just shy of $10 million, which brings the incentive to increment ratio of 13.18%. Staff does recommend approval as presented. I'm more than happy to answer any other questions that this body may have. I know we've talked about this in closed session a few times, so.
Thank you for adding that. I wanted the audience to know that this has been discussed previously in closed session, and staff has been working on the recommendations as advanced through those closed sessions. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. I would ask for questions, comments, any?
Well, just a quick note.
Certainly.
Sorry, that 13% figure is low compared to what we typically see in developer agreements.
Yes.
Right?
Correct.
And per the recommendation of council. So we were trying to be as prudent as possible. Any questions from our audience members?
One of the comments that I want to make is that I know that a concern for many projects who have tried to come here before, they said they've often said that we don't have enough rooms. And I know that the Cobblestone is often full, the Holiday Inn is also full, and I think that this would be another great piece that we have to so that we can lure more and more events here.
Excellent, thank you. All right. We have a motion on the floor and a second to approve the developers agreement as presented, as negotiated by staff and directed by council. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you for your work on that, Director. And our next item, request for approval to apply for a Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin Pollinator Protection Fund to plant a native planted lawn program. Yes.
You just read 8.
You skipped number
Oh, did I? I was excited about the bees. What can I say? All right, item 7.
Buzz.
Yeah, it's all the buzz. Well, actually, I got a gift today, too. I got a gift, a little ornament. It was a bee, so maybe that's why I was thinking of that. Anyway, request for approval, my apologies. Request for approval to apply for the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation Vibrant Spaces Grant for the Emerson Park Revitalization Project. Sir, your turn.
I'll move approval for.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation just this year announced the Vibrant Spaces Grant as an addition to the CDI Community Development Initiative Program. Applying for this grant does not impose any, I guess, restrictions on applications to other funding programs. But after the announcement of the program, Director Karnowski and I reviewed several different locations and community groups that this fund would be applicable for, and noting the immediacy of the Emerson Park project, deemed that this project would be the most applicable, both for the execution of the project, but also the benefit for the local child care organizations to maximize the impact of the grant.
And the matching funds
Are already secured.
through,
The Friends of Emerson Park.
thank you. I didn't want to say it. So.
Gotta be spoon-fed, that one.
Yeah, I'm trying to, like, come on. Yeah. So there's not a burden to the taxpayers, the Friends of Emerson Park.
Correct. If anything, it'll help us accelerate the project to a point where the multi-sport court and art area will be executable through the end of the year. The fund doesn't, or the grant funds do need to be expended by the end of 2023. We are confident that would be applicable, or it would be possible through this year, and hopefully bring us to the next stage for the pavilion.
Wonderful. Thank you for your work on that. Questions? Yes, sir.
Is there a timeframe that you have to get submission to be able to get the grant?
Yep, so the application is due, I believe, it's either the end of January or the end of February. The grant is already under construction and should be easily completable by then.
Come see our new playground. It's awesome. All right, thank you. Any questions? Comments from the audience? I'm excited. I hope we get it. Be wonderful. So, all right. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Now we get to, I'm going to say it again, request for approval to apply for the Natural Resource Foundation of Wisconsin's Pollinator Protection Fund to pilot a native planted lawn program. Who is that? Is it you two? Come back.
Oh, I'll make a motion to approve the application.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. This is exciting.
I'll gladly come back to discuss this one. Thank you. So in 2021, I believe, No Mow May had been a program that had been approved by the city of Stevens Point and had been initiated and carried out or administered through the Community Development Office. And through much discussion with the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, the Central Wisconsin Wild Ones, and several other nonprofit organizations, there was a hope for an expansion of that program, and has been much supported by community members also reaching out for a program to expand the use or the purpose of No Mow May to be more beneficial to local pollinators, which we see as a benefit to the administration of this program as well. So back in 2019, the Natural Resource Foundation of Wisconsin had received a large donation of $500,000 to go towards pollinator protection programs, or a pollinator protection fund to be administered statewide. If you go to their website, you won't see that fund listed. That fund has been kept rather silent, but they will be sunsetting that fund at the end of 2023. So we would like to utilize that fund while it still exists to run the program for 2 years, applying for 2 years of funding to pilot a more comprehensive pollinator program for private yards that do require residents to contribute matching funds to the program. So we are not just distributing funds to those residents, but we're requiring them to take an active role in acquiring plans, submitting those plans to the Community Development Office, and then we will help cover the cost of the seeds and starts for those yards.
Wonderful. This is exciting. I love this. Is there any questions? Yes.
Yes. So this is going to be a situation where they wouldn't cut their grass for the whole summer if they get into this program?
So not necessarily they wouldn't cut their grass for the whole summer. They would complete a plan for their yard that would identify locations for certain types of pollinator species within their yards. We would get a lot of those recommendations for species from UWSP and the Central Wisconsin Wild Ones, so that we are conforming with native species. And then it would allow them to not mow those species down over the entire length of the year. So they cannot just let their grass grow and be unmowed for the course of the year, they will have a plan on file that shows these plants existing year-round.
Okay. I must be mistaken, because when I was reading through it, it said like extending the no-mow May. And no-mow May is nobody cutting the grass.
I believe was listed in the memo as extending the benefits of No-Mow May, not extending the actual program. So we would not be extending No-Mow May past May.
And I believe most grasses, regular, like Kentucky bluegrass is not necessarily a pollinator species, but echinacea is.
Correct. So the Central Wisconsin Wild Ones will provide a comprehensive list of species that would be applicable for the program.
Last question I have is then, what about rental properties? Like student rental, if a landlord wanted to get involved in this, or because they can get extra money for their property to help, upkeep. Is this limited just to residents, or can it be for investment properties?
General rule of thumb for our grant programs is that they're allowed only to owner-occupied housing. But in this case, we have not restricted this use away from rental properties.
Okay, thank you.
Director?
Yeah, just to clarify as well, we already offer through Chapter 21 of our ordinances that you can submit a plan for a native lawn. This specific request is actually to help offset some of the costs to do a native lawn. And we have, the folks that we've worked with in the past have done some really exceptional work. I mean, there's a property on Elk Street that is probably like the pinnacle poster child for great native plantings. And we had worked with her a number of years ago on implementing a native lawn and approving a plan. And this is just kind of the financial impact. So the request isn't necessarily to have that program. That program already exists. It's just for the city to help offset some of the costs to do the native plantings through the grant itself.
Okay, any questions? Good questions as always. Anyone from the audience? All right, bringing it back. We have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Very well. Motion carries. And then our last item is approval of claims paid. I would entertain a motion to approve the fact that we've already paid the bills.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. Any questions about the claims paid?
I've been having concerns about that stadium PA system, but that's a separate issue.
We'll bring it up at a different meeting. So. All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carries. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second.
Aye.
All those in favor? Yes, yes. Good, great meeting, great discussion. Thank you, everyone.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.